Hello and welcome back to the history of video gaming. My name is Ben, and join with me again is Wes. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. We've got quite the episode this episode. We're going to be talking about some games that are not racing games, but did come out in 75.
Very cool.
Yes. But before we get into that, why don't we get into what we've been playing, what we've been watching? What have you been up to, Wes?
Well, I was just talking to you about it a little. Been kind of playing the same stuff, but I've been watching people playing WoW Classic, of course, because it's been pretty popular right now. Probably we'll see, depending on the lifespan of WoW Classic and how long the nostalgia lasts, might not be as popular by the time this episode goes live. But yeah, it's been pretty enjoyable to watch. It's hilarious the queues that people are sitting in just to play it, and the fact that I don't know if you have to buy retail, but I know you have to pay the subscription. Like, I'm just definitely not going to play it. It looks awesome, but
yeah,
especially if I have to buy retail, because I'm never going to touch retail.
Yeah.
But the subscription fee too. So it's just a little strange. Like, I get they want to make money, but it's like, come on, Blizzard, you couldn't make like up to level 20 free in WoW Classic or something like they did with retail after a while.
Yeah.
So I'm a little salty about that bit of it, but it's been fun watching people play it. I love that they kept all the stuff the same. The graphics like aren't updated at all, and I mean, not that they're great in retail WoW anyway, but they're the classic graphics and all that. And yeah, I just think it's hilarious that how much people are loving it and getting into it, and like the suffering is almost part of the reason why you love it.
Yeah,
everyone's like, "Oh man, this sucks. It's great."
Yeah, I mean, I've been tempted a little bit. I've had some friends who have gotten into it, but I'm honestly just don't trust Blizzard at all. So
big words.
It might be cool now, but they'll eventually move to Burning Crusade or something, and it'll be all messed up again. So
yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people. I was watching Lobos Jr., a streamer, play it, and a lot of people in the chat were just saying like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait till Classic Burning Crusade." And then someone else was like, "Yeah, but then you just have like what happens like years down the line when it's just two versions of retail that are exactly the same."
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I played up to Burning Crusade, so for me, like, still feel the nostalgia up to that. It'd be weird if they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna keep adding stuff to this version that we made, and it's fun because it's the base version."
Right.
Like, I don't really get the philosophy behind it, but I don't know. They're making money.
Yeah,
they're doing something right.
They're making tons of money.
just cashing in on like, hey, this is the old junky game that we released. Come play it. Yeah. Although they did, it's apparently a patch version that doesn't have like a bunch of the bugs that the base game did.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't just like totally like dig in their basement and pull out like the 8-track that had the source code on it. That doesn't make sense, but I wanted to make it sound like it was old.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me a lot of like RuneScape, because I've been playing that, and that is something where they kind of advance the game, and everybody was like, "Whoa, we don't like this anymore," and they're like, "We found this version from 2007." And they're like, "Give it to us."
That's right. Yeah, I forgot they had the old version. Everyone's like, "Yeah, screw new Coke. I just want Coca-Cola."
Yeah, exactly. So, like, it was weird too, because they forced everybody's accounts over to the new one. So, like, my old account is on what's called RuneScape 3, but all the new RuneScape things I've been doing are on old school RuneScape. So. Yeah.
Oh, and did they ever let you migrate stuff back or no?
No. You had to start a new character. Yeah.
That kind of sucks.
Yep. But at least with RuneScape, they have the polling system, which I think I talked about a little bit before, but all content updates have to pass a poll by the community. So, like, whether or not like Burning Crusade would be added to WoW Classic, like that would be a community decision, you know, which to me is like amazing. That's the only reason why I'm interested in paying for a subscription to RuneScape, because any time the developers are like, "We want to do this bad thing," everybody's like, "Nope." And then it doesn't go in. Like, just I want to say a month or two ago, they had a poll and it was like, "We're thinking about introducing or like being sponsored by third parties to make these cool features. And they're like, yeah, that sounds like a scam, so we're not going to do that. And it failed the poll and it's not in the game. So
very cool. That's crazy. I didn't realize there was like that level of democracy going on in that.
It's kind of crazy because, well, it's crazy and it's funny at the same time, because on one hand, you could have these developers be like, we, want to push this patch through. It's a big patch. It's going to add a lot of content that we've been working on for months. And then the community's like, no, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah.
And then
it's such a weird development environment because they're like, yeah, I just like poured my heart and soul out in it, and the community's like,
I know. They just had that. What they wanted to add a new skill and it failed.
Oh no.
Yeah, which was like a big thing, but at the same time, it's kind of weird because the RuneScape developers, I've seen a lot of posts where they're like, oh, my big content update failed. Guess I'll get paid anyway. I'm like, oh, okay, that's true. But yeah, it's interesting. I think it's,
as long as they're cool with it.
I think if WoW had introduced something like that, I would feel a lot more comfortable going back to play it, because I know, all the mistakes that, or the reason why WoW Classic isn't good, or WoW Original isn't good to a lot of people, wouldn't just happen to WoW Classic again, But I kind of think they will.
Yeah, you're still going along for the ride, right? Like you're still paying to let Blizzard take you wherever the hell they want to take you.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't trust them at the wheel. They're drunk.
We'll have to see. I'll keep observing as a third party for now.
Okay, that sounds good.
But so you talked a little bit about RuneScape. What else have you been checking out recently?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about, so last week I mentioned I was kind of floating in between a couple games, and one of the ones that I floated in was Dawn of War, the Warhammer 40k game that I always go back to.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And so I play a mod called Ultimate Apocalypse, right? And it had a bunch of new units, new gameplay. It was just complete overhaul, really, really cool. But that mod hasn't been updated since 2014.
Oh, shit.
The past couple of years, I've been kind of modding it myself a little bit. I've been doing some balance changes. I think the most radical thing I did was like add 1 or 2 new units, which were just basically like other models in the game that were just bigger. I can't do any modeling or anything. But, I've been doing that fairly often, off and on over the past couple of years. But just a couple months ago, the development team posted a new update in 2019, like 5 years later.
Really?
Yeah, and I didn't really think much of it because the patch notes were just like cleaned some stuff on the back end, added a couple animations, added a couple sound effects, just little stuff that I was like, okay, whatever. Don't need to get into this right away, right?
Right.
So I was thinking, floating between some games, I was like, maybe I should install this and just, cleaning stuff up on the back end would help me in balancing, right? So I thought, I should probably do this. So I downloaded it. It kept crashing. I ended up having to do a full reinstall of Dawn of War, which sucked because I lost like all my balance things.
Oh,
so
yeah.
All those like months of work were like on, but
that sucks.
But it's okay though, because I downloaded the mod, I finally got it working, and holy crap, there's tons of new things. So all my balances would have been off anyway. But like, I play Tyranids a lot because I like Tyranids, right? And they must have added like 3 or 4 new Tyranid models and units. And I'm like,
oh wow,
there's only like 10 or 15 units before, so that's a fair amount. And they added, I think, 2 new buildings, like new voiceovers and stuff. And It's the same with all the other races. And I was like, holy crap, this is like basically a new game. I mean, for the Space Marines, they added 2 new Titans. And I was like, hell yeah, man.
I mean, Titans are where it's at, too.
I know. I haven't played them yet because for whatever reason, the mod, all the units costs are like ridiculously high. So most of my balancing is lowering it so I don't have to play like 2-hour game just to get a Titan.
Right, just to get a new unit.
But it's really fun, and so much has changed in good ways too. Like things that I would never be able to change, have changed. Like a new building, I could never model that, or
Right.
Even just move some of the techs and some of the researches into that building would just take me hours. So I was like, this is amazing.
That's awesome. Just out of nowhere, 5 years in the dark, huh?
I know, exactly. And they are on Discord, and I'm in their Discord, and they are pretty active right now. They're trying to get a new patch out, and you're gonna like the new one because they're working on a lot of new TAL units. And I've seen some screenshots, and they are awesome looking. So they're going with the big mech stuff.
You gotta.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's my favorite part about the TAL.
I know. So I'm really excited about it. And even though once that one comes out, I'll probably have to do another rebalance, but it's still worth it because there's so many things I would love to be able to see and play in the game that aren't there yet, just because Warhammer is so vast a universe.
Right. Yeah. It's got so much background and so many different materials that help build the universe, whether it's like the comics or the books or whatever else, that it's like including everything kind of needs like this years of like tons of people chipping in.
Right. And I mean, even units that I don't think have ever been in any video game before because they're so kind of out there. Like, I was playing Space Marines and they had this weird tank that had like it kind of looked like a giant, like two giant plasma cannons like sewed together or something like that on the top. Really cool looking, but I'm like, I'm pretty sure this has never existed before other than on the tabletop. So I feel like the work that they're doing is just kind of incredible. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. I really wanted to shout them out because the Ultimate Apocalypse team is really good at what they do. And it's great for me because it's a game that I go back to probably every year to play a little bit because the base game is so good and their mod I think is just awesome. So, but yeah, it needs a little bit of balancing, I would say.
Well, there you go. That's where you can come in to make it the perfect game for the way you want to play it.
That's right. Because I'm coming from a StarCraft perspective, so I want to be able to win in 5 minutes if I want to try to cheese. I want to be able to have a pretty long game, but no game should be over an hour, like in my opinion. So,
right.
At the 45-minute mark, if I don't have a Titan, I'm like, what's going on? Yeah, it's cool. It's really good.
Sweet. Yeah, a good example of how like those old games, and especially if it's something you're interested in, it like keeps the game alive in totally unexpected ways.
I know.
It was Freelancer did that for a while with some of the dedicated fans around that, with like Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars Total Overhauls, but I don't think many of them are supported anymore.
I know most of the old mods for these games, they kind of had like an overhaul of the game, and then that's kind of it. But it's really exciting to see that this team is back in it after 5 years and they're still doing stuff. I don't know if they'll ever do another update. They say that they're going to, but I'll take whatever I can get from them.
Yeah.
Honestly. You want to move into the special topic, Wes?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So today's special topic involves Pong, because we've been playing a lot of Pong clones and talking about a lot of Pong clones. And I thought this was kind of an interesting side shoot of Pong and its fame. And that's that in a lot of magazines and newsletters and even like newspapers, people would sell make-it-yourself home Pong consoles. And I really mean like make it yourself. Like I looked at one called the Interfab Pong 4, which came out in 76, but it basically just replicated the 1972 Pong. And you had to like solder things yourself. To me, this is like pretty advanced. It apparently contained 43 integrated circuits, which I think you had to do by hand, or place on the board or whatever. I don't know, but
right.
It looks like you're looking like in the motherboard of a computer and it just being blank, and then it's like, okay, you have to make the motherboard now, and you're like, what? But I thought it was kind of interesting offshoot of it because it's kind of crazy to me to think that people at home would be anywhere near technically savvy enough to make basically a console from scratch. Just a bunch of parts.
I guess it kind of shows that at the time, like in the early 70s and especially before that the video game industry was really like an enthusiasts kind of industry, because a lot of the people who are interested in it would the games themselves for like the Creative Computing magazine, or who had the electronics experience to like know how a system worked. And it hadn't really been at the point where there's all these pre-made home consoles so that like anyone can jump in other than like arcade machines. But I guess for home systems, especially at this time, it's crazy. Yeah. Cause I think about it now. I'm like, I don't know how an Xbox or Switch works. Like just I'll pay you and then,
Yeah.
But I'm sure it was part of the fun at the time for the people who were interested in making these systems.
I mean, in some ways, I feel like people building your own computer is kind of an extension of it today. But
yeah,
I mean, I've built my computer and it's nowhere near as complicated as this stuff. So
right.
I don't know if that's the tech, like industry has evolved to the point where we don't need to be that technically savvy, or like, I don't know. I just find it very strange that these kits are around and they seem fairly popular, because we have a list here of quite a lot of them. We're not going to go through them all, but there's probably what, like 40?
Yeah, throughout like probably like 75 to like early 80s or something that we saw some of these.
Yeah.
And it is crazy. And I wonder if it's hard to tell if part of it's they're so well kept because it was an enthusiast community, or they're so well kept because they were popular. You know, it's I think a lot of the reason why it's so easy to build with all like the tools and different systems that you have to help you out is just like the accessibility. Like the company wants to make it easy for people to make their own stuff so they can sell their product. So I don't know. I guess that is just sort of the evolution of the industry and of the audience. But yeah, it's crazy seeing 75 where they were just selling it and like, hey, make your own system.
Yeah, and I don't know, like I feel like the price on them is pretty crazy too. I looked up mine, and with inflation, it rounds about to about $425, which to make it yourself, I would never pay, because if I broke something, I'd be like, oh my god.
Right.
And I will say this though, the Pong, that you end up making is fairly advanced type of Pong, double controller with sound effects, with scoring. So that's the full Pong experience that you're getting. So it's not like they dumbed it down at all, but
right. I guess that the version you were looking at too that had all those was still like 76, right? Or
yeah, 76, 77.
So that's still pretty early for that to be like, hey, you can have all this on a home system, like with the sound and I guess part of it's like if you're paying extra for that kind of package instead of like a company trying to make something cheaper so that they could sell it at home. I don't know.
Yeah. I can't remember how much the consoles were. Like the full, like wasn't the Odyssey only like $500, I want to say? It wasn't that much more.
And then the newer Odyssey, the one that we covered, I think 2 episodes ago or 3 episodes ago, that because they really stripped it down, I think was a decent bit cheaper, but I don't know how much with inflation that one ended up being.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know. It just feels like a strange market, but it was definitely something that was prevalent in the late 70s.
Yeah, and into 78, I had one that I picked out to look at mainly. I'll be honest, just because of the slogan that they had, which I'll talk about at the very end.
Okay.
But this was in 78. There was one created by an Australian company called Dick Smith Electronics. And it had tons of different options for like customizing, it boasted that it had the option to customize the paddle size for each player, although they called them bats in this. And you could do it individually, so one person could have a larger one and play against the other person that had a smaller one. And it said there was 10 different games that could be played on the system. I think some of those were just determining your own rule sets, but still it's a pretty big list. And this one was more some assembly required, but it was mostly as far as the electronics already constructed. And the main reason, like I said, that I picked it is they had a side thing on the magazine where this was originally advertised called the "Sorry Dick, It Doesn't Work" guarantee.
Okay.
And it's simply in every box that you bought, there was a coupon that I really hope physically said "Sorry Dick, it doesn't work" on it. But you were supposed to be able to just send the broken system back to Dick Smith Electronics with that coupon, and they would fix it for you.
Okay.
Yeah, just an interesting niche. I mainly just thought the fact that they literally phrased it as like, "Hey, sorry, it doesn't work,"
Yeah.
It was pretty hilarious.
I'm not surprised. Well, I mean, if you're making it yourself, the chances of something going wrong are pretty high, I would say. I have a hard enough time building my Warhammer models.
Without breaking all swords or arms, yeah.
I know, without having to solder or anything. I mean, I'm sure some of the models maybe, but not the ones I'm doing.
Right, yeah. No full metal models here.
Yeah, I just remember reading that, and I was like, do they expect people to be able to solder? Is that like a skill that most people should have that I do not have? Because at times I'm like, that could be useful, but I would never actually like learn it.
The more you get into messing with PCs and like other electronic kind of stuff, my brother definitely uses it a lot because he's more into the. He does, yeah. He solders. I'm trying to think last time he's had to do it because I actually am not very computer savvy, so I'll embarrass myself if I'm like, yeah, he soldered a something because I'll probably be wrong. But I mean, and he's done like easy stuff like resetting the chip on like a processor with like thermal paste and stuff like that. So,
oh right, yeah, I just get the ones that with the thermal paste already on. So I'm like,
right, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely I think still that element, and it's hard to tell from our perspective now if it's like as prevalent as it was when these were going on, because this seems blatantly like, hey, just build your own system and like figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of when we were talking before about the arcade machines and how the creators or the owners of the machines could go in and do stuff on the back end.
Right.
I don't know. It feels kind of like an extension like that, but with the home consoles.
That's true. Yeah, it's kind of like maybe the audience is expected to just know how to do it, where now they aren't expected as much to know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. So that was in like the late 70s, but most of these are related to Pong, so I thought it was a good time to bring them up here in 75. But I think with that, unless you have anything else to add, we'll get right into the timeline.
No, yeah, I think that's all I had to say, so let's get into it.
All right.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's get straight into our timeline, starting off with something new that we've never seen before, clones of tennis, soccer, and hockey games.
Oh yeah.
So we gotta keep throwing curveballs, keep the people guessing, or else they're gonna think that all we talk about is Pong clones, you know?
Yeah. Well, we'll give them soccer clones instead.
Right, exactly. We get those soccer hockey clones in there, you know, people love it.
Yeah.
These first ones were just multiple releases of either tennis, soccer, hockey game types by URL/Electra. And those were Combo 3, Tennis, Soccer, Hockey, Electra, Video Action TC, and Video Action T. And these were all just basically, again, clones of the tennis, soccer, and hockey kind of games.
Yep, and after that, we've got another selection of clones here. I didn't go into like too much detail, but they're all clones of either Pong, Pong doubles, hockey, or soccer. So you've got hockey, soccer, tennis, which is different from Wes's tennis, soccer,
tennis,
hockey.
Soccer, hockey, right?
So hockey, soccer, tennis. That's by Technical Design Corp. We also have Double Play, which is by Elcon. Triple Play by Elcon, and Fascination 500 by Fascination Limited. So more clones, you know how it is. So,
right.
Moving away from Pong a little bit, we've got Flip Out by Volley, also released in sometime in 75. and that is a clone of Clean Sweep by Ramtech. Of course, Volley and Ramtech, have a relationship similar to Key Games and Atari, so it's not surprising that they're getting on the Clean Sweep train with Flip Out.
Yep. And then next up, we'll switch back from some of our Pong clones and go to some of our computer games. The first one we have is GeoWar, which was in the Creative Computing magazine. And this one was a game about angles where you have to shoot enemies that are attacking your base. It was all text-based, and it makes it more of a angle guessing game because you have to figure out where to shoot the enemies. And after that, we had ICBM, which, because I've played Call of Duty once, I know is Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. And that was by Creative Computing. And it's a game where you have to use angles to shoot down missiles. So very similar themes to the one before it.
Yeah, I should mention these are all in the Creative Computing May/June issue. So
okay,
we're in there in 75. We've got 3 more games that came out in that issue. One was Splat, which I'm 95% sure was a 101 basic computer game that already came out. But it's a game where you have to open a parachute at the last moment before going splat. And then we also had Lunar, which was a port of Lunar Lander, which is an old computer game that we've talked about a couple different times. It's had a couple different iterations. And also they had Super Star Trek in there, which, let me tell you, I saw the code for it, and holy crap, that, like, I would say the average game in one of these newsletters is about 100 lines of code, but Super Star Trek was 1,000.
Holy cow.
Yeah. I mean, the game is really good, but I would never try to, like, write all that myself. And then finally we had Sea War, which kind of sounded interesting. It's a game about, you would guess it, using angles, but it's angles more in terms of like looking, like shooting up and over something, like if you're shooting a basketball, like an angle like that, and you're trying to shoot an enemy ship or sub. The game had something kind of interesting where it would ask you, to make a guess of what angle to shoot your ship's rockets or whatever at, and you had to answer within 7 seconds of it asking you that. So it kind of made the game a little bit more fast-paced and tried to make it a little bit more interactive. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of a guessing game using angles instead of numbers or whatever else there may be. That'll do it for the Creative Company May/June newsletter of 75.
Very cool. So some new ones in there. A lot of angles, but interesting ways to implement those.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we can get into the first one that I got to take a look at, and that is Crossfire by Atari and Key Games. And this was in May 16th of 1975, but this one's interesting because it was only ever a prototype game. And according to one of the people who was at Atari at the time, I think Lyle Rains had said that this prototype, the cabinets they made were sold, but it was never actually put into full production, as far as I know from the info we could find on it. And so for the gameplay of this, it's a 2-player game. Each player's on one side of the screen, and there's a large ball in the middle and several squares positioned around the screen that make the ball bounce when it hits them. The players on either side were basically horizontal Pong paddles, just facing the other direction, which were represented sort of guns that each player controlled, and they could only move vertically like the normal Pong style. And what the players would do is shoot a projectile that then hits the ball in the center, and with each consecutive hit that you make on the ball, it gains more momentum and moves in that direction towards the opponent's side of the field. And basically you have to keep hitting that, getting it past the squares, which are basically bumpers on the map, and try to get it onto your opponent's side of the screen to score a point. It did have a score displayed at the top of the screen, and it was just black and white graphics, and it had a lot of different Pong sounds for when the ball was bouncing off of all of the bumpers, but it did have an interesting like laser or gun sound for the projectile, which was kind of like a, I don't know if you'd call it like strobing or oscillating sort of noise that went in and out really fast and then faded out. And this is as far as we could tell from looking at it, but we're pretty sure that it did have that original sound. Another interesting thing that came up when I was playing it is that it seems like the projectile, if it was in midair but hadn't hit anything yet, would still move up and down in the same plane as your paddle. So you could almost curve it if you shot and then moved your paddle up instantly to hit the ball if you wanted to get it around or change it at the last moment because the ball in the center bounced off a bumper or something and you were going to miss it. And also, you could only have one projectile on the screen at a time. So it either had to go all the way to the other end of the screen or hit something and disappear before you could fire again. So there's a lot of interesting elements in this and ways that kind of differentiates itself. It has sort of a Pong basic overlay to it where, each person's on a side of the screen, get a ball on the other person's side of the screen to get a point. But instead of being able to control the ball directly, you have to shoot it to get it where you want it to go. And I do like, I feel like other than sort of racing games, you don't see momentum or like differential speed in a lot of early games. So it's cool that if you hit the ball multiple times in succession, it would go a lot faster and your opponent has to react a lot quicker than they normally would.
Right.
But at the same time, if they hit it, then it goes in the other direction and kind of negates the speed that you had. I did do a couple tests though, and if you hit it 3 times on one side and then hit it on the other side, it doesn't negate all the speed. It just knocks it down of like a speed 3 or something, if you want to call it that, to like a lower speed. So you have to hit it the same amount of times in the opposite direction. So a lot of cool different stuff in this one. And to get into my ratings for the graphics, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. It's very simple graphics, just black and white. Top of the screen and bottom are white, where the score is at the top. And the court is black with a couple white squares and then the ball in the center. The ball in the center actually looks pretty good. It's round. It's not a giant square, so I thought that was nice.
Oh, yeah.
You never know with some of these early games.
We've not really seen a circle in most of these games, to be honest.
I feel like it, yeah. It's. I mean, I guess there was like the really tiny circle-ish Pong ball, but...
Well, I shouldn't say anything. In my next game, the Pong ball was literally a square that just moves really fast.
That's how it is for the projectile in this. I think it's just literally like a pixel that moves really fast. So you're like, oh, okay. But part of the reason this looks more like a ball is because it's pretty large. It takes up a decent bit of the screen, so I think that helps. It's like Minecraft style. If you want to make a picture of something, the bigger you make it, the more definition or pixels you can get in there.
Yeah.
And other than that, for the graphics, it's just sideways Pong paddles, basically. So 1.5 out of 10 for that. For sound, I gave it a 2 out of 10. The new sound with the guns is pretty cool, but also it's really annoying. I like that it's different, and I like that there's a new sound in this kind of game that I don't think I've seen or heard in any of the other games that I've played recently for this. But just the fact that every time you shoot, and also when the opponent shoots, it plays. There just ends up being like overlapping, like and just like. I also had my headphones too loud, so that was part of the problem. But I was like, "Oh my god, get me out of here!" But, so that's partially affecting my judgment of this. I like that there's a cool new sound. The big ball in the center, when it bounces off the bumpers and moves around, just makes the noises that the normal Pong ball would make when it's bouncing off paddles in the wall. But nice that they had something extra in there for the projectiles. For gameplay, I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's pretty fun, and I think it's a unique way to look at the typical Pong kind of game, not change it up too much and require too much more from the cabinet or like the technology in the cabinet, but make it a different game. I like that shooting the ball with a projectile adds like an extra element to the usual Pong formula, and the fact that it gains momentum is really neat. But overall, it's pretty simple, and I think for a few plays, it'd be pretty fun. Definitely having somebody else playing with it and the back and forth that you could get going with somebody, I think could be pretty good too. For me, I think I'd enjoy it more if there was a little bit less of the bumpers on screen. It made it really hard to predict where the ball was going to bounce. which is kind of the point. But at some point, it's like it's hard for me to hit it, and I think having somebody else play it would be even harder and make it kind of random. So overall, it was pretty good for gameplay, but a couple of things that I think could have made it a little bit better. And for relevance, I gave it a 2 out of 10. It was never a fully released game, so I don't think in that sense it could be relevant. But I do think it did at least a little bit to say, okay, we've been playing these Pong-ish games for a while. There's still ways that we can innovate and still ways that we can make it a little bit different. And overall, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. It's a fun game with some cool new elements and has a pretty interesting take on like ball and paddle-ish sort of game. And I think it's just another example we can keep creating new interesting games from the technology that they already have.
Nice.
Yeah. It was a pretty good one. I went on for a while about that too, so I think you could tell that it was interesting. I had a lot of cool stuff about it.
Yeah, when I was looking at it, definitely reminded me of like a tug of war game or something like that with the ball in the middle, which I thought was cool. And
it's kind of a different take on it.
Yeah, and I also probably didn't tell you this, but I think I read somewhere that the game was kind of extra interesting because when the ball started to get towards your opponent's side, because you could only have one projectile on the screen at any one time, it means that the distance between the ball and your opponent is really short, so he can shoot it really fast when it's on his side and get, start it to roll the other way. Whereas your projectors are taking a farther, longer time to hit the ball, so it apparently resulted in a lot of instances of people making like really drastic comebacks, which I think is pretty fun.
Right, yeah. So it gives you that you're not totally on the ropes when it's closer to you because you can shoot so much faster. So you really get kind of a advantage right before the opponent's about to score.
Which I think is pretty fun. So yeah, this is one of those games where it was kind of in the gray area because it's a prototype, but since they sold it and we found a version that we could play, I was like, well, we should probably talk about it. And it's Atari. So
right.
I was like, yeah, we should probably talk about this one.
Definitely worth taking a look at even as a prototype because it did do a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, I love the, both sides were shooting projectiles at the same time, which I don't know if we've really seen something like that before. We've played a lot of games where one person is shooting and usually the other person's like dodging, but
right, or hitting a ball back and forth, but not really competing over like the same objective almost.
Right, or even just there being more than one ball on the screen. Like a couple Pong clones have done that, but yeah, I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
Let's move on though to my first game that I reviewed, which is called Super Flipper by Chicago Coin.
Oh yeah.
And this one's actually really interesting because I think we've mentioned Chicago Coin in the past and they've almost exclusively have just copied things. Like that's all they do. But this one's kind of crazy because they were apparently beginning to distribute their games in Europe. And one of their local distributors was a company called Model Racing, and they were from Italy. And basically what Model Racing did is they made a video game by themselves, and they called it UFO, sometime in early 75, and then they were like, hey, boss Chicago Coin, does this interest you? And they're like, what, an original game? Let's steal it. And they came out with Super Flipper. And basically what Super Flipper is it's like a pinball Pong hybrid. So you played the pinball video game that Atari made.
Right.
With the flippers, but this game has Pong paddles where flippers would be. And you can move the Pong paddles to prevent the ball from going into the game over area. So
interesting.
Yeah, and there's also 2 Pong paddles like probably halfway up the screen, so you could do like as if they were extra flippers up higher. Same kind of concept, but instead of the flippers, you've got Pong paddles, which I thought was really interesting. And there's a couple other things that I think are really cool about this game. One is the sound effects are really good. You've got your Pong sounds in there, but you also have, bumpers, and this is all digital, but bumpers and stuff that actually make bumper noises that are really accurate and good. I was like, wow, this sounds like a pinball machine. Like,
oh wow,
I know it sounded really good. I mean, you had a little bit of the old and a little bit of that really good, accurate stuff in there. But we'll definitely take a listen to that right now. And in addition to just sounding good, the cabinet looks really, really good as well. It's one of the best looking cabinets I've seen, and they really made it look like an arcade machine pinball cabinet. It had very bright colors. It had UFOs on it, which was cool. Nice. I guess in reference to UFO, the original Italian-made one, or Italian-made prototype. But it was like kind of like comic book stylely drawn, and it also had like overlays on the top of the glass of the TV, so it just looked good. It sounded good, and I think it played pretty cool as well. It was like another take on Pong, where you're just first in the machine trying to get a high score, but it's playing like a pinball machine where you're hitting the ball up towards the top, and then it slowly, after it bounces off some things, falls back down, rolls back down. So it's got some different physics than a normal Pong clone would have that remind me more of like the pinball game that you played.
Right, yeah.
So with all those things combined, it made it for a very interesting, we can say somewhat unique game from Chicago Coin, but it wasn't their game. But they were the first big company to get on this, obviously. So it's known for being a Chicago Coin game. And it's one of the reasons why we didn't cover UFO previously, because I just thought we should cover them both together. So getting in my ratings, I gave the gameplay a 3 out of 10. I think it's pretty good. The thing that's holding it back really is the actual, design of the like pinball board or whatever, like all the squares and where the bumpers are and stuff. Like it's very static, it's black and white, and after playing it through for a couple minutes, like there's nothing else that you're going to get from it. So I just feel like the replayability isn't that great. And I should, maybe put a caveat out that I'm not really like the most interested person in even like normal pinball. So, I don't think it would ever get a really high score, even an amazing pinball game for me. But if you really like pinball, you should definitely try this game out, because it has a lot of pinball elements that I think you'll like, but it also has that Pong component to it that I really enjoyed playing the most. So yeah, I gave it 3 out of 10. For sound, I gave it 3.5 out of 10, because like I mentioned, the sound is pretty like awesome. So hopefully you guys heard that earlier and agree with me, but if you don't, suck it.
Wow. He feels strongly about the sound in this game, people.
It's good sound, yeah. It sounds like a real pinball machine. And for graphics, I gave it 2.5 out of 10. I kind of struggled with this one for a while, because I wanted to give it points for the cabinet, I wanted to give it points for the overlay, and I did kind of combine that into everything, but the core gameplay is just a bunch of black and white squares and lines, and like I mentioned previously, the ball itself was a square that moved really fast, but it wasn't a ball. So, it's not the best looking game, but it was definitely something that I would purchase for the cabinet, because the cabinet looks awesome, and I would put it in my house and everyone would be like in awe and be like, that looks amazing. So I wanted to give it some points there. So I gave it 2.5 out of 10. And then for relevance, another thing I kind of struggled with for a little while, I ended up giving it a 5 out of 10, which I think is pretty high. It's, on average. Mm-hmm. And that's because it's a really cool innovation of the pinball genre, doing something that, unlike the game you played, Wes, this can only be done by a video game. It's not just like a poor replica of pinball. This is Pong mixed with pinball, and a design that can only work in a video game. And I love that about it. And it's also relevant because now you've got Chicago Coin publishing semi-original pieces of work, and they're cool and they're interesting and they're pretty advanced. So I'm hoping that Italian company will keep making games, and they will. So that's very exciting to me, and I think it's a great first opening game from them. So I wanted to give it a bit of relevant score there. And so all those combined get me they leave me with a 3.5 out of 10 for Super Flipper, which I think is pretty good. Part of me feels like maybe being a little bit hard on it, but because I feel like compared to some of the games that are coming out around this time, only the racing games are close to it, in my opinion. You know, by this time, even games like Elimination, which I've praised before, are kind of like, okay, we've seen enough.
Right.
So this, what to me was a very fresh take on Pong. And even though it is still Pong, it's something that's very new and innovative and was really refreshing. So I like this one.
It sounds cool, yeah. And especially, I mean, 3.5 for something that's kind of coming from a company we don't hear about much, and one that, as you mentioned, usually is just ripping stuff straight from other. It's awesome to see something where they took the pinball, from Italy maybe, but they took that pinball idea and exactly, just gave it its own spin and said, what if we combined both of them instead of just kind of retrofitting Pong to pinball, like with the TV pinball that I had played.
Right. Yeah. Because I feel like with yours, I think something you even mentioned when you played it was, well, I could just be playing real pinball right now, you know? That was called Pin Pong, by the way.
Oh, Pin Pong, not TV pinball, right.
Yeah. And like, that's a good point, you know, but Super Flipper does its own thing. And because of that, I think it really stands out in this space. So yeah, if you like pinball machines, definitely give it a go, because even the cabinet looks awesome. I know it's not, you know, actual pinball gameplay, but I think you'd like it if you like pinball. So give it a go.
Very cool.
So moving on from that, we've got another honorable mention here called Deluxe Baseball by Ramtech. And this is basically a clone of baseball, which they came out with apparently last year, with slight improvements and a larger cabinet. And this came out in June of 75. Now, I want to quickly mention here that Deluxe Baseball, I feel like, could be baseball. I feel like they could be the same game. And if so, this release date for Baseball by Ramtech, I feel like is where it should be. Because we mentioned that it seemed too good to be true. I still think it would be too good to be true in 75, but I think this could be a much better date for it. So you historians out there, double check that this isn't the same game, please. But for now, I'm leaving it as two different games. So
someday we'll solve the mystery of Baseball by Ramtech.
I know. So was it by Ramtech? I forget now. Or was it by Taito? I feel like anything that's good is probably by Taito. No, it was by Ramtech. Okay.
The original. Okay. Good, because I forgot to.
Yeah, but yeah, I just feel like if you take one word off of this title, you've got baseball. So
it's that close.
This date makes more sense to me. So maybe it came out then. I don't know. But Deluxe Baseball, at any rate, people normally separate it, historians. So this one came out June of 75. Wes, why don't you talk to us about a new console? Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into a new console that we have in 75. We did see a previous version of this console, the VideoMaster TV home game or something. I'm mixing all those words up.
Yeah.
It was the original one in 74, I think. And this one is the VideoMaster Rally system, which is the fourth iteration, I think, of this system, and it released in 75. One of the things that hit me first when I was looking at this is on the box. The quote that they have is fantastic. For reference, this is a system that just plays a home system that plays like the Pong, tennis, those kind of games.
Mm-hmm.
But the quote is, "There's a good game on TV tonight, and you're playing."
Oh God,
It's
I don't
something
know, I
about
like that.
Well, I mean, with my emphasis, it might make it a little weirder than it was originally intended to be. But they're like, you are playing the best tennis game that's happening on TV right now. That's pretty good. A little presumptuous, but I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And the company was based in England. I looked it up because they put the apostrophe in a different place every time they say your, and it was throwing me for a loop. But the symbol itself was very small and simple. It was just sort of a black box, kind of similar to, like, if you imagine like the original Sega Genesis controller. I think it might have been a little bit bigger. And it had a black knob on each side of it and one button next to each of those knobs for each player. It also had volume and a start button, and it looks like it also had sliders at the top in each corner so that you could manually keep track of the score in the game, because this system didn't have any on-screen scoring. And in the manual, it had 4 different games that it suggested you could play. There was tennis, which was more similar to the Pong version. The previous VideoMaster kind of had an Odyssey version of tennis. This one has 2 paddles and a ball with no center line. And as far as I can tell, maybe double check me on this, Ben, but I don't think the paddles could move horizontally. I think they were just vertical in this version.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what makes it more similar to that Pong version of tennis than the Odyssey version. But it did have similar games and or game modes to the older VideoMaster system. It had Find the Gap, which was a single-player game. One side of the screen was a wall, and there was a hole the size of the second paddle in it. Basically, that hole was static, and you just had to get the ball into the hole to get a point. Another game they had was Wall Game, which is an incredibly original name. This was a 2-player version of Find the Gap where one player controlled the hole in the wall, but it was still the same objective where the other player just had to get the ball into the hole, and the player who was the hole had to make sure they didn't get the ball in. And the last one, this one unironically is an original name, is Stonewaller. And this was basically the demo mode where it was just a solid wall on the other side of the screen and you could hit it back and forth off it. But the manual also described it as being a sort of practice squash type of mode where you could just practice hitting the ball off the solid wall. So a lot of interesting ways, sort of Odyssey style, where you had this home system that can do a few things, but you create all these rules so that you can make a lot of different games for it. And yeah, that's pretty interesting system. The source that we were reading for it also suggested that some of the games at the times were basketball, which was the same thing as Find the Gap, except you just put the hole at the top of the wall so it looks like a net. So I like that ingenuity. And the other opposite of basketball is called mouse, where you put the hole at the bottom of the screen, and now it's a mouse hole that the mouse has to get into.
Okay.
I like that one a lot because then you're imagining that the mouse is just being slapped back and forth by this paddle and for some reason can't find his way home. Yeah. But the main things to take away from that is it had those 4 main sort of game modes, and there wasn't any on-screen scoring, and it didn't have any sound for this system.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about it is they went from the Odyssey style to the Pong style, which up until this point, I want to say most of the home consoles have been Odyssey style.
Yeah, I think you're right. And at some point, I wonder if they realized that maybe giving a little bit less choice and locking that movement to just vertical was starting to be really popular, and people enjoyed that style more.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like if you're selling a home Pong console and you've got basically a picture of Pong on the cover, people probably don't expect the Odyssey movement at this point. Most of the arcade machine games, I would say, even though some of them are Odyssey style, I would say most are Pong style, where it's just vertical.
Right, and people getting into this system for the first time, their experience is probably arcade games, not another home console like the Odyssey.
Right.
So I'm sure they're expecting it to only be that vertical movement, so it probably would have been a little weird at the time if it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's pretty much all I have for the VideoMaster, unless you had anything else to wrap up on that.
I will just say that this is the Mark IV version, and if you've been following us really closely, you know that we have talked about the Mark III, because the last one we did was Mark I and II. And for whatever reason, Mark III will come out after Mark IV, so be prepared for that. The VideoMaster actually releases 3 consoles this year, so we are not going to see the end of them. And while Wes was not able to give a rating on this one because we didn't have any video or emulation of it, we will have it for some of their future consoles, so be prepared.
All right.
And moving right on to the last one that I rated, this is a game called Drop Zone 4 by Meadows Games. And again, if you've been acute you know that Meadows Games is kind of a company that is in infamy around here because they made Flim Flam and Flim Flam 2.
Right.
That's been their only 2 games that they made before this. But they're making a new original game, so that's cool. This came out in June of 75, and it's a timing game where you're basically an airplane that's on a set course going left or right on the very top of the screen. You can't move the plane or do anything, but you hit a button and the plane will drop a bomb, and below you at the bottom of the screen are some like squares that are moving in kind of 3 different lanes, kind of like if you think about like Frogger and 3 different, car lanes or something moving. They're on a set path, but they're kind of random when they come in and out. And you basically have to drop a bomb and try to hit one of these boxes, which I want to say were supposed to be ships, but they're just rectangles, so nothing else, just rectangles. So this game is kind of interesting. The gameplay is not great because you're basically just trying to time this, and you don't have a whole lot of time to make a decision. And basically, when you drop a bomb, it doesn't go straight down. It kind of gets launched like at a 45-degree angle down to the bottom right, and then slowly will start to turn straight down. So it's kind of like there's some momentum as it leaves the plane and then falls down. So it can be hard to just aim it normally. But the game plays, you've got a certain number of bombs, and you have to try to hit the rectangles as many times as you can. That's how you get your high score. But the thing is, every time you hit, I want to say 10 rectangles, the plane speed will increase, and it's like a fairly dramatic increase.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it starts out pretty slow, but then I saw it getting to the second speed, and even that I thought was pretty fast. You're basically guessing because it probably comes in on the left-hand side and leaves the right-hand side probably within a span of 2 to 3 seconds, I would say. I mean, pretty short.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's probably one of those things designed to steal your money, but the gameplay is kind of original. And one of the most interesting things to me about this game are the graphics, because it's got color graphics, which for this time is still fairly rare, although we are starting to see it a little bit more. But they use the color graphics in a really interesting way, I thought. They could have just made the rectangles different colors or the airplane different colors or something, but what they actually did was at the very bottom where the lanes are, it's just, black with white rectangles, but then above that, you have different shades of gray that kind of look like a pretty nice skyline, or they just give it a really nice, aesthetically pleasing sky for the airplane to go on, using a bunch of gradient colors of gray. And it looks nice. It looks really nice. So I thought that was a really interesting use of the color, because the plane is still just white. The rectangles are white, and you still have a big black box at the bottom, but the sky looks kind of like a real sky. And I was like, wow.
It's a no smart clouds, use of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, to say like if we change the background from just one color, it'll actually make it more visually interesting.
I know, and the colors that they used really made it feel good. So I was like, wow, that's a pretty good use of color. I feel like a lot of games that we've covered have used color in ways that really they didn't need to use color at all. Like color Pong. Like, who cares?
Right.
But I feel like an airplane game probably is one that I would say you probably don't need color at this time, and yet it was there, and they did it in a good way. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then the other thing about it is the airplane model itself looked really good.
I was wondering. Cool.
Yeah, it looked really nice. It looked like a sideways view of an airplane. It was kind of like squished a little, I'll say. Something about the dimensions were quite right, but you had a tail, you had the nose, you had wings. It looked nice, I thought. Way better than the rectangles below, which were just rectangles, but the plane itself looked pretty darn nice. So it had a lot of really cool things with it. And I'm really starting to get like really interested in Meadows Games, because I'm like, wow, they actually have some talent.
Yeah.
They're not just all about the flimming and the flamming. So But yeah, I don't know if this was a passion project or what, but it's a pretty good game. I will say, the gameplay is probably the worst part. I ended up giving it a 2 out of 10 for gameplay, just because I don't feel like it'd be hard to get talented at it. It seems like after a certain amount of time, the plane's just going too fast, and you just have to guess. So, you can't give a game credit for that. But I think the gameplay is unique and original, and it was fresh. It wasn't like the airplane games I've played before in Space Sim, thank God. You're dropping bombs. I don't know. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
For sound, I'll definitely play a clip of the sound right now. So as you can hear, it's kind of quiet, and then you've got the sound of the bomb falling, and whether or not it hits or misses. The missing sound is kind of lame, I thought, but the hit, when it hits, it's actually like a pretty decent explosion sound. And in addition to that, I should mention that the whole screen will flash for like a second, like the whole screen. So it kind of makes you feel like an explosion happened, even though at the end the rectangle just keeps moving. It doesn't disappear or anything. But you do get a nice sound effect. So I gave the sound a 1.5 out of 10, just because you've got that one nice sound effect, but then there's times when it's just quiet. There's times when you miss and you just get like a,
Right.
Yeah. That's not really realistic or anything. So I don't know. I just gave it 1.5 out of 10. For graphics, this might be a little bit lower than I kind of made it up to be. I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. I mean, with the plane model looking so good and the gradient sky, you'd think I'd give it higher, but I feel like the bottom screen really detracts when you're just looking at plain rectangles and they look ugly, and you don't know, could it be a car? Could it be a submarine? Like, it could be anything. So
cows, yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know. I thought that really detracted from it a bit, but 2.5 is still pretty decent, I think, for graphics. And then for relevance, I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. I don't think it's as relevant as like an Atari game or anything, and I don't think other people are gonna copy this game. Meadows Games is still a fairly small company at this point. They're only relevant to us because we talk about Flim Flam a lot.
Right.
So I just gave it a 3.5 out of 10. I think it's an interesting and cool game, but it probably didn't really influence that much. So overall, I give it 2.5 out of 10. It's a fairly decent game, even if the gameplay is really repetitive and kind of impossible to win. I think it has there's some charming quality about it that I really quite like. I think it has a lot to do with the gradient background and the quality of the airplane model, but also maybe just because I like Meadows Games.
Yeah. When you name something Flim Flam, we're definitely in. Yeah. And also, I mean, we named something Drop Zone 4, and we have no idea if there were like 3 other drop zones. I mean, that's
true. That's very true.
That's pretty good. It leaves a lot of mystery there. But it kind of reminds me of, I mean, we'll have to see when we inevitably get to this game. I might be misremembering what I think it is, but it sounds like Upside Down Seawolf. I don't know. Isn't that the one where you're a submarine shooting at battleships? But
I've never played that. I don't know.
I think it ends up being a pretty big one. I don't know. I forget who it's by. I'll have to look it up after this and see when we're going to end up getting to that.
Yeah.
And if that's even the right name. Oh, gee. Sort of like the timing and like things going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So interesting to see that in kind of an early form in this.
Yeah. You know what it reminded me of, actually? It reminded me of like a carnival game. Or like even like the catch the fish with the fake fishing rod thing, Right, yeah. I don't know why. Maybe just because the gameplay is so simple, but I don't know. There was something kind of charming about it that I really liked, and I feel like my score 2.5 out of 10 might be a little low, so maybe I'll bump it up to a 3. But I don't know. So there's something about this game I kind of like, even though if I were to play this game today, would I really play it long? No. Right. But
it's like me and Clean Sweep. There's just something you can't describe sometimes. The score might not reflect it, but you're like, I kind of like it, even though it's not like great.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bad game, but compared to some of these other games that had innovations that didn't help the gameplay, but it impacted my enjoyment of it in a positive way. So, yeah, I don't know. That was Drop Zone 4 that came out in June. We are now officially basically halfway through 75, even though I would say the second half is a lot more intense. So,
right.
But let's move on. We've got 2 more games here, and then we're going to wrap it up for today. So for our next game, just an honorable mention, we've got a game called Build Up, and this is a Play-Doh game, which are like the more advanced computer games of the early 70s here. Usually I would play this on the Cyber One terminal, but they don't have it on there for some reason. So, but there's a fairly good documentation that it did exist and about what the game is. And the game was a 3D maze type game where you just had to find the exit, but it's 3D because it had multiple floors. So when they say 3D maze, they actually mean like 3-dimensional maze where it's not just a top-down view or something. So I'm not sure if that was first person or how they did that exactly, but that's how it's listed, and I'm sure it would have been a pretty cool one. That one was by Bruce Wallace in June of 75.
And not to be confused with Bruce Willis.
Yeah. Bruce Wallace.
Might have been making movies at that point. And the last honorable mention that we have today is Dead Heat by Taito sometime in 75. And this one, not too much info on, but it most likely was a clone of Indy 800.
Yeah, so I haven't heard of Taito in a while. They've been taking it easy.
Yeah, we'll have to see, because they've definitely had some good ones there. I'm hoping they got some more stuff and towards the holiday season of 75 that we can really get into.
Oh, I think they will. So, but yeah, I'm glad that they're still doing stuff. I wish we had more info on that one, because them coming up from a not Grand Track 10, background, I wonder how close it was to Indy 800, or if it was just like an 8-player version of Speed Race. I don't know.
Speed Race, yeah.
But,
and it has a good name too.
Yeah, like Dead Heat.
Street Burners, Dead Heat. Different company for Street Burners, but we're seeing some more innovative names to some of these games here.
Thank the Lord, because I can only deal with Splat for so long. And we also had tennis, soccer, hockey, and hockey, soccer, tennis today, so maybe we shouldn't say anything.
Right, that's true.
But yeah, just a quick recap for today's episode. We had let's start off by talking a little bit about some make-it-yourself Pong games, which still blows my mind that anybody could put together a game using like these analog and digital components from the 70s. But, we talked about some creative computer company games that came out in May and June of 75. Talk about Crossfire, the Atari prototype, which was kind of a tug-of-war shooting at a ball game. Talk about Super Flipper, the Pong pinball hybrid, the VideoMaster Rally, which came out in 75, home console, and Drop Zone 4 by Meadows Games, which I still am thinking fondly of, so it's gotta mean something.
It's worth something, absolutely.
I think with that, check us out on Twitter. Check us out on our website and email us any questions or corrections. But I know you can't do the latter because this is perfect.
Right. Yeah. We never get anything wrong.
Yeah. So we haven't gotten any emails regarding that yet. So we'll see you guys in the next one. I'm not sure what we're going to be talking about yet, actually. I think it's more consoles. So
it's a mystery even to us. So look forward to that.
Yes. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good time.
See you in the next one.